Vikings brass finally got in front of the media and addressed all the things going on in their offseason lately, and I kind of think they nailed it. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate all of you so very much. You're making this thing go. And now that camp is showing up, I'm sure that there are some new people around that are going to start flooding in, trying to get the scoop on what's going on with the Vikings. You've come to the right place. You can find this show anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, Monday through Friday. Just search out Locked On Vikings on your favorite podcasting place, including SiriusXM, YouTube, or even Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today is Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions for the most part today. We've got some other news items to update you on, so we'll go over that and then answer questions as submitted to me via email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or in the show notes. There is a Google form you can fill out, or you can just give it to me on Twitter when I put out the call on Mondays if you prefer that. And the first one that I am going to answer today comes from Jack from St. Paul, who asks, how do you think KOC and the coaching staff / ownership should address the offseason turmoil and distractions over the last couple weeks? So now that camp is on the way, it's starting to get rolling here. They did their introductory kind of year beginning press conference. Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi did a joint press conference together and answered some of the burning questions and gave us a whole bunch of updates. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you those updates first, and then I'll circle back and talk about how they discussed. They started out by discussing Kyrie Jackson and Jordan Addison, and turmoil, I guess, is a nice safe word to use for all of that. But they also gave us some updates on what's been going on with, for example, TJ Hockenson. They said he will start the season on physically unable to perform list. There was some speculation that they might do IR instead, which you would want. IR would be better. He'd be able to come back from that faster. So Pup, I think he has to miss the first 4 games now, or the first 6 games now. I think that can go to longer, and then that, I guess, gives us a sense, though, for what they're feeling. They're feeling maybe we'll call it an October return. We'll hope for TJ Hockenson. Maybe it leaks into November, but that's kind of the timeline we're looking at, which that could have been a lot worse, so I'll take that. Also, this is fairly old news, but I haven't talked about it yet. Cam Akers signed with the Texans. We thought he signed with the Vikings. He did not sign with the Vikings. It was on ESPN's Transaction Wire. There were a couple of reports that they had agreed to terms pending physical. But now he's a Texan. So why did this happen? There's 2 reasons that I can think of for why that kind of thing happens. Is 1, he would fail the physical with Minnesota, and then in Houston, he either passed the physical or they waived the physical, which a team can do. They can say, hey, yeah, you'll get healthy when you're healthy, come sign, and well, it's fine. And they're just incurring the risk of not really understanding how good a shape you're in. So the Vikings maybe weren't willing to do that. The Texans were, so he goes and plays for the Texans. That's, I guess, it. That's all I can think of is either the Texans waived the physical or it just like perfectly timed that he failed ours and succeeded on theirs, but that feels unlikely. I think the Texans waived the physical. That's just a health thing too. Like, we'll see if he's even ready to go. A lot of times that like tells you that the Vikings were really worried about his health. As exciting as he was and how fun as he was last year, you got to have functioning legs to go on a football field. So that brings me to there were some other questions about, Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, and kind of echoing what we sort of already knew that they were going to do. Sam Darnold, he's going to be the first team quarterback kind of until proven otherwise. And I don't think that there's much expectation that JJ McCarthy takes it before week 1. I would fully expect Sam Darnold to be the week 1 starter until something else happens. However, O'Connell did imply that there would be some rotating of first-team reps, which would be pretty cool. I think it'd be good for J.J. McCarthy to get first-team reps as part of that development, but I don't think that's like true blue competition. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in camp. There's nowhere to hide when you got a bunch of fans looking at every rep. So we'll see how that goes. The presser started, though, with what Jack from St. Paul was asking for. Now, Jack from St. Paul put this in the Google form days ago. So this is the answer to your question is what happened this morning. First off, they came out and had a nice heartfelt statement about Kyrie Jackson and what he meant to the team and all that, and announced a couple of things that people have been asking for. They're going to wear a KJ decal on their helmet. They're also going to have nobody is going to wear 31, at least this year. Maybe that'll continue Corey Stringer style, but I'm not sure if they're going to do that in perpetuity or just for this year. And they'll also have pins on their lapels that I think say KJ on them or 31 or something like that. So they're going to do these kind of symbolic things to honor them. I know a lot of people really wanted to see that. And the Vikings are giving $20,000 to Kyrie Jackson's funeral. They're paying out the rest of his signing bonus to the estate. That was reported by all the beat reporters. That's in the CBA. You've got to do it's like any money. Essentially, the way the CBA says is if a player dies while under contract, whatever money that player was entitled to goes to his estate, even if it hasn't been paid out yet, like guaranteed salary or signing bonus that's still in escrow because the check hasn't actually been mailed yet. All that still goes to his estate. So the Vikings honored that. And then the $20,000 to help pay for the funeral, or most of the funeral, I guess, because it's a joint funeral with the other teammates that passed away in the accident. So the Vikings have, I would say, taken some action here, and it's not just words. And I think that's important. But I do think the words were, I guess if there were an answer I wanted, it was that one. And this is just me. I think there are definitely people who super disagree with me and think, especially when it comes to Jordan Addison. I mean, when it comes to Kyrie Jackson, you say it's a tragedy and we're all very sad, but there's not exactly a lot of room for controversy. With Jordan Addison, it's a much stickier situation. Like the relationship between the Kyrie Jackson thing and the Jordan Addison thing is undeniable. And they were like, so how do you deal with that? What do you do with that? And I really liked Kevin O'Connell's answer. You should go watch it. But to paraphrase, he really focused more on the human aspect of things. How do you deal with it when somebody that you're responsible for mentoring messes up, does something bad, unequivocally, bad thing, don't do it? And for me, this is just my personal thing. A lot of people are not going to agree with this, and that's fine. You can continue to not agree with me, and we can all coexist. But for me, I want to focus on the goal. What is the goal of a conversation that Kevin O'Connell has with Jordan Addison about him getting in trouble, right? Like, Kevin O'Connell's job is not to be the one to dole out punishment. The NFL is going to do the doling out of punishment. Kevin O'Connell's job is to be a mentor. And the goal here is all the same for everybody. It's to not have him do that any more times. We don't know more of the thing. Don't do it anymore. And so how do you accomplish that goal, right? Well, hopefully the suspension helps as a disincentive. That's the whole idea behind punishment. But as a mentor, O'Connell wants to have that conversation compassionately while making it clear, don't do the thing any more times. No more of the thing times. No more of the thing. And sometimes it's easier to get someone to understand something through a compassionate conversation than it is to just negative reinforcement until the lesson sticks. Sometimes that works better for people. And for O'Connell, he cares still about, like, the way he put it was like, my job is to make Jordan Addison the best version of himself that he can be. And I really like that. Even when we're all mad at him, the job is still to make him the best version of himself that he can be. And the best version of himself that he can be is one that knows not to do the Dewey anymore. So how do we get there? And I don't think throwing him out on the curb is doing that. That's just me. You can feel however you want to feel about that, but that's how I feel about it. There are a lot of other questions that are much more about on-field stuff, and I'd much rather talk about all that. So we'll move on to those next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. I mean, it is a job board, but it is an exclusive place. It's a social media, let's be honest. And fully 70% of people on LinkedIn aren't visiting other job boards. So if you're hiring, you gotta go to LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has a lot of ways to help you out as well, because they understand that you're probably not just hiring today. You probably have a whole lot of other things you have to be responsible for, especially if you work for a small business or you own a small business. So go to LinkedIn, use their tools that will help you write a good job posting, that will help you narrow down large pools of candidates, and take advantage of their ginormous pool of candidates. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go check out the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube channel and podcast feed. However you're listening to this, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports. Moving on with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. We're off it. We're off the Jordan Addison thing. How about we talk about the edge rushers, which is what Noah Tweets Daily asks. What does the edge rotation look like for the upcoming season? How frequent of rotation should we expect? So that's the other thing. Andrew Van Ginkel also is injured. They're hoping that comes back soon, but O'Connell was a little bit cagey about that one, and so I don't really know what to expect. He seemed more optimistic than not, so I don't know. I think he'll be back, for some of camp. I don't think we're talking about like November or anything with him, but we'll see. Because he didn't give any kind of timeline or anything like that. So the way it looks right now is Dallas Turner with the ones, Jonathan Grenard with the ones. There's your edge rusher rotation, and then you have Pat Jones sort of fending off a whole bunch of youngsters in Andre Carter and, undrafted guys like Bo Richter, all these other edge rushers. And then, you also have guys that could kick out to edge, like Jihad Ward or Jonah Williams, that could also play that kind of job, the outside linebacker / edge role, though those guys are a little bit more inside defensive ends, which is a different thing in the 3-4. Those are Dean Lowry's. That's the way I've been, the Dean Lowry memorial role. So that's, I guess, the rotation. So as we start, if we don't have Van Ginkel, it's those two. If Van Ginkel comes back, then it's some rotation of them, and I think that those snaps are up for grabs in camp. I'm sure Grenard will play as many snaps as is smart to play him. Most defensive linemen, even the superstars, don't play every single rep. I think Myles Garrett does, but even he should rotate out sometimes, I think, to keep him fresh. So I think you max out the best efficiency is probably 85-90% with your best player, and then you need 2 drives where the twos come in and spell them. So that's the extreme of it. Or if everybody plays really well in camp and you want to 50-50 it with Turner and Van Ginkel, or maybe Turner gets more because he shows out really great. It depends a lot on how Turner's camp goes. But I would imagine you're going to see some combination of those guys running in and out. There's your edge rusher rotation, and it's something I was super worried about going into this offseason and am a lot less worried about now that they've spent quite a bit of resources on it, but I kind of knew that they had to. William Eggert asks, is there another running back move or acquisition going to happen for Camp and Beyond now that Cam Akers is in Houston? Probably not. There's another running back question about Kenny Nwangwu in here. So your running back room, you got Aaron Jones, you have Ty Chandler, that's your starter and your backup. So to me, everything beyond that is we got youngsters vying for it. We've got enough. I don't think you need to go out and get a veteran to be running back 3. That can just be Myles Gaskin. It's fine. So I think they're good. And the other thing is also Cam Akers would have occupied the roster spot vacated by Kyrie Jackson. So that could be a corner too. That's really, if you want to do the thing where we, replace every corner with a corner, then it would be going out and getting a corner. It could be an interior defensive lineman. It could be another tight end. This is, player 89 on the roster. That's probably not going to make it at this point anyways. The Kenny question came from Mitch D, who asks, with the NFL kickoff formatting change and the assumed better odds of injury prevention, do you think teams will be more likely to trot out their premium players, i.e. Aaron Jones, as opposed to Kenny? That is a really interesting thought. I'm going to guess no, because it is still a very different thing. And I don't think I necessarily need my starters to learn a whole nother thing. That said, if you look at field goal block units, they all have Christian Darrisaw on them, right? Like, and that's just a numbers game. You put every lineman that you have dressed out there on the field goal unit. But I think you probably still have more kickoff specialists, and you run different plays. But I don't think you necessarily want your Aaron Joneses out there using up their energy. Like, especially with Aaron Jones, where I think fatigue is going to be a thing to manage, and it's really important to make sure he stays fresh throughout the game, especially late in the game. I don't think I need to give him extra responsibilities with the kickoff. But I'm not saying that with any level of certainty at all. You could totally be right here. Another Kenny question comes from Ryan, who asks, does Kenny need to learn how to actually be a running back to make the roster, or is the specialist returner only spot still open? I mean, we ask this every year, right? Like, there's a major change to the kickoff rules that could have a big thing, but like at this point, this is the third year in a row of going, well, surely he can't make the roster just being a specialist before he makes the roster for just being a specialist. So I think the Vikings have declared that they are okay with that in principle. Now, how this works on the kickoff return thing, if you want to just put Ty Chandler back there and save your roster spot, I guess. But somebody needs to be running back 3, and I don't know if there's any serious challengers to that with Kenny Nwangwu that didn't like also lose that job to him last year. Like, who's going to take it? Myles Gaskin? He never even got on the active roster. The Vikings went all year last year perfectly comfortable with putting Kenny Nwangwu in instead of Myles Gaskin. So yeah, I don't think that we need to do that, but I do think that, like, he could be a Cheryl's for as long as you need him to be, if it matters who your returner is. And last year, it didn't matter at all who the returner was, because there were no kick returns, like, at all. And guess what? They still rostered him. So I think we can probably put that question to bed. Next one comes from Shadow, who asks, what's your opinion about playing one less preseason game as the league shifts more toward joint practices and a longer regular season? Look, the longer regular season, I'm conflicted about. As a selfish football fan, it's more football, and I like that, and that's fun. Yay, go football. But I understand that the way that things are trending, if and when an 18th game gets added to the season, the players are going to get hosed on it. They're not going to get... It sounds like the proposals as they are, like, they wouldn't get additional game checks. They would get their game checks spread out over more games. And so that's what the NFLPA is not going to stand for that. So there's still a long way of negotiation to go, but it feels unlikely that this happens in a way where the players don't get hosed. And I don't love that. So it's like, selfishly, I want more football on my TV, but obviously in a matter of principle, that's not the best. So I don't know. Conflicted thoughts. Very difficult question to answer. Hopefully that does lead to less injuries, though. If you do want to go toward, like, joint practices over preseason games, I think is fantastic. It's annoying because it's not on TV, so we aren't as privy to it, but like, they get more practice reps than they do in preseason games. I feel like I say that every day, and yet people are still like, why don't they play in the preseason? They're not going to be ready for the season. They're playing more reps. There's more preparation, but it's safer preparation. You're not tackling full speed. You're not, exposing yourself to as many injury situations, but you're getting more practice in. So I think that is strategically smarter as well, and it's what the Vikings are going to do. Don't expect any starters to play in the preseason again. And more teams are taking this on as they realize that, it doesn't really affect your preparation too much at all. Swede's Goal asks, what practice squad stash will make the team this year? I assume you mean last year practice squatter. I think the easy answer is Tristan Jackson. I think he's just slotted in at like wide receiver 6 right now. With KJ Osborne leaving and no real serious acquisitions replacing him, everybody just gets bumped up one. And Tristan Jackson was the guy that was like on the roster bubble last year, kind of on and off the active list and activated from practice squads and playing some special teams. So I think he kind of holds that spot right now. And then there's a bunch of, there's Lucky Jackson and, Ty James and undrafted guys that are vying for that spot, trying to take it away from him. But I think it's his to lose. Josh asks, who is your player you're watching that you think is going to make a significant impact outside of the obvious choices? A significant impact outside of the obvious choices. For better or worse, probably Ed Ingram. He has to keep that development coming. If he kind of falls and stumbles and has a bad year, that could be a pretty big deal. And I don't think that he's a particularly obvious choice. I don't think he's somebody that people will look at. But I think just about every starter has had like plenty of discourse. Like I could say Josh Metellus, he's a wildly popular player now. I could say Cam Bynum, everybody loves Cam Bynum. I could say Shaq Griffin, but I think he'd like maybe be the first person that comes to everybody's mind to answer this question in terms of like who will be like the X factor. I just did an episode though about Vikings X factors that are players that will, kind of sink or swim with the Vikings season. If they do well, the Vikings do well. If they do poorly, the Vikings do poorly. Kind of those pillars. Gonna try to blast through the rest of these questions coming up next on Locked On Vikings. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, and it's America's number one sportsbook for a reason, because right now you can go to FanDuel.com and get a new boost or bonus every single day. So whether it's a WNBA game that's on, a basketball or a baseball game that's on, or a football and NFL future you want to go bet on, Olympics, whatever, find it all at FanDuel and go to FanDuel.com to get a new boost or bonus, no matter who you are. No more, you don't have to be like brand new. You don't have to go to a special, no, just FanDuel.com. Just go check it out. FanDuel keeps the sports going year round, even in July, where this is the closest we get to a dead period, even though there's still, there's still the WNBA and the MLB going on. But no hockey, no NBA, no NFL. Still lots to gamble on. So go check it out at FanDuel.com. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. It's Twitter Tuesday, and that means I'm answering your questions like this one from Adam Kleinsasser. I assume you are related, and thank you so much for watching Tell Your Dad that I loved him growing up. You're related, right? All Kleinsassers know each other. He asks, can you please explain how waivers work with practice squads? If players signed to a team's practice squad, how is another team able to swoop in and swipe a player from the original team's practice squad? So, for the uninitiated who don't understand the mechanics of a practice squad, your practice squad is not on your roster. You don't have the exclusivity that somebody on the 53-man roster is. If the Chiefs called up Justin Jefferson and said, we would like to sign you to a contract to work with us, in the same way that, you work for paper sales company A and paper sales company B can call you up and say, hey, what if you worked for me instead? And you can just leave paper sales company A, and there's not a lot they can do about that unless they have a specific provision in the contract. NFL teams can't do that, right? The Chiefs can't call Justin Jefferson and say, hey, come play for me, right? Like that's tampering. That's against a million rules, and everyone would get in a lot of trouble. Practice squatters are not on your 53. They are not subject to such protection. So the Chiefs could call your practice squad wide receiver and say, hey, we want to put you on the roster. They are functionally free agents that have agreed to, for a price, come in and practice with you, basically, and be on your scout team and learn and call it a developmental role, right? But they aren't bound by contract. They are essentially at-will employees versus, contractual, they're filling out an obligation. So that's how other teams can come in and swoop. But to snipe a practice squad player, you have to make it so that the team can't do anything about it. If the Chiefs want to take, say, Lucky Jackson off of our practice squad, they can only do so if they put Lucky Jackson on their actual 53-man roster, which entails cutting someone that maybe they drafted, that maybe they really like. So that's why it doesn't happen left and right. Somebody that didn't make your team, but would make my team more so than someone that already made my team is kind of a rare situation, right? And there is also that player has every right to go from one team's practice squad to another team's practice squad. but there is no like forcing thing there, right? There's a negotiation that can happen, but it's basically the same as, your at-will employment of being pulled from paper company A to paper company B, if that's something that you were not previously familiar with. Jim S.A. Quits asks, what are other methods and schemes that Flores could use to help hide the deficiencies of the corner group? So typically, if you're trying to hide bad corners, there are two moves that you want to go to. The one Flores uses is just blitz a lot, right? If my guys can't cover for 4 seconds, get to the quarterback in 3, and we'll send a whole bunch of people to make that happen. But in a way that can kind of expose those corners as well, because now they're more likely to be on an island. They have less help. So the other way you can do is go the other side of that spectrum and essentially give that corner all the help in the world. You'll get a bunch of words for this, but I'm talking about cover 2, basically. You call it squat technique or a flat responsibility, or under what are palms. Like there's a bunch of different words for it. But if you're a cover 2 corner, remember the old famous Mike Zimmer quote, you can find a cover 2 corner at 7-Eleven, because cover 2 cornerbacks have just the flat responsibility. Everything deep they pass off, so they don't have to cover anybody deep. They're lined up in press against Tyreek Hill. They have nothing to fear, because if he goes deep on a go route, he's someone else's job. Which means that you can press a lot more aggressively. It means that you have a zone responsibility. You're just kind of dropping to a landmark, eyes on the QB, and it's a little bit more of a foolproof job. That it gives you a lot of boosts and a lot of help, and it's a great way to hide a player that's not playing so well. The problem is that there are a lot of holes in cover 2, and everybody's really good at them. So if you want to live in cover 2, your defense is probably going to get gashed a whole bunch, but at least they can't just like pick on one guy all day and put up 50 on you that way. Like you'll stem the bleeding a little bit, but you're not going to stop it. Tracy asks, what is a swing tackle and how valuable is a good swing tackle? A swing tackle, when I say swing tackle, I mean one that plays left and right tackle and can be both, so you can swing them around wherever you need them. What makes a good swing tackle is, of course, that versatility. You want that balance, and that just means you want to be good at, the left-handed kick step and the right-handed kick step, understanding how things are different with that footwork, and being able to switch back and forth between them. You kind of have to get a little bit ambidextrous to be good at that kind of thing. Which you've talked about, like David Quessenberry. He's been a swing tackle for basically his whole career. So he can go from left and he can be at left tackle, and then maybe the right tackle gets hurt. Hey, we got to move you over to right tackle for 3 plays. He can do that while somebody else comes in at left, and then the right tackle comes back. You go back to left tackle. Like he can switch back and forth without having that like period of, oops, I got to get used to doing this, with my offhand. That's really the skill of playing swing tackle. Ken Lovin asks, of all the Vikings seasons out there, would you say that the 2005 team had the weirdest season ever in team history, or is there another candidate? I thought about this for a while. The only candidate I can think of for a weirder year is 2010. It's really hard to compete with the Whizzinator and the Love Boat. Those are supremely weird things. The ticket scalping thing that happened with Mike Tice, like everything about that season was a fever dream. But I think 2010 got a little weirder. We played a home game at Ford Field. The stadium collapsed. You had the Brett Favre debacle. Randy Moss showed back up, threw a pass to Brett Favre, insulted the cafeteria and got fired. And then the guy who fired him got fired. It was a wild year and lots of weird stuff happened. I think you could definitely make the argument for 2010, and I think that would be a decent debate. And I'll give them an honorable mention to 96, which was the year that in the middle of the season, Dennis Green published an autobiography, which I actually have in my little thing of books behind me, if you're watching on YouTube, called No Room for Crybabies, in which he outlined a plan to like a plan for a hostile takeover of the Vikings from their ownership group at the time, a scathing critique of the media that would write columns about him all the time, many of whom are still the media. I mean, these are people like that were covering the team, back then and still are, like Suhan and Royce, like all these Strib guys and all that. And a scathing critique of racism in the NFL and his experience with racism and all that, and he just dropped that in the middle of the season. Insane things that went on. Plus, you had like this Warren Moon, Brad Johnson thing going. You had a whole bunch of weird stuff like on the field going on that year. Honorable mention, but I don't think it holds a candle to 2005 or 2010. Malcolm Biggles asks, I don't want to get political, but when are you going to step aside to make room for a younger Locked On Vikings host? When you die. That'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out. We'll go back to Everyman Series camp stuff tomorrow. And as always, Skull.